Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor, Peggy. I'm Becca, and if you're watching over on the YouTube channel, you might notice that I'm in a bit of an unusual get-up, and it all matches in with today's theme, which is cosplay and classic cars. Having a little chat about how I combine two of my hobbies and explaining what I've been up to literally today. I'm dressed like this because I've just taken Peggy to a little local area that's probably a little bit more public than I'd like to take some photos in cosplay. So, I appreciate that a lot of our regular listeners might not know what cosplay is, so I guess we'll start there. So cosplay is the kind of hobby of dressing up as a character from a film, a comic book, a TV show, anything really from popular culture. And it's something that I got into kind of after I got into dressing vintage. I think technically my first cosplay was well before that, and was a character called Star-Lord from a Marvel movie's Guardians of the Galaxy. I did a female version of that for a little Comic-Con that I went to whilst I was at uni, and then didn't really do much more than that. But when I got into wearing vintage clothes, and my main interest back when I started wearing vintage clothes was primarily 1940s and early 50s clothes. A lot of the people that I followed over on Instagram spoke about this character called Peggy Carter, and despite being into my Marvel movies, I never really paid a huge amount of attention to the Captain America movies, which is where Peggy Carter came from. So I sat down and I watched these movies, and then I found out that there was a TV show, and I watched those and totally fell in love with this fictional character in terms of her strength, her independence, the fact that she was a real key player within the movie. And at the time, obviously we've come even in such a short space of time, at the time she was really a very unusual thing to have in a movie. A iconic, strong female character in a comic book movie like Captain America was still something that we were only really starting to see. And so I started building my very first cosplay together of her, and it was her army uniform from the first Avenger movie. And a big part of cosplaying is kind of pulling the outfit together. You can buy kind of outfits that are pre-made and have a lot of fun with those, but a lot of the time, even when you buy those, you customize them and alter them. So I bought a standard UK Army number 2s, I think it was, and altered those with kind of my own sewing and also a bit of help from my dad, and altered those to look much more like what she wore in the movie. So that was my first kind of foray into cosplay, and I did that for I think maybe one big Comic-Con before we went into lockdown. But I hugely enjoyed the experience of Comic-Con. Comic-Cons being a big convention, and if you've ever been to the NEC shows, you'll know that those happen at the same kind of time as them in the Birmingham Convention Centre, and there's lots of people going around in interesting costumes and cosplays. So that experience at Comic-Con got me really excited, and my friends and I, who I went with, were planning on going to what would have been the May 2020 Comic-Con. But of course everything went down into lockdown, and I was in lockdown during those first initial 2 weeks of lockdowns with my birthday, and given that I couldn't go out for my birthday or do anything for my birthday, I decided to kind of treat myself to what is one of my favourite cosplays now. It's one that I designed completely myself, and is based around the idea that was floating around at the time but has since become kind of part of Marvel canon, that what if Peggy Carter got the super soldier serum that Captain America gets instead of him? And based around all of this, I thought about, okay, what if she had to do the USO shows and stuff that he'd had to do in the movie, so designed her USO costume. I'm not very good at sewing and hadn't got any experience really at the time, so commissioned somebody on Etsy with my drawings to make it all up for me. And it arrived, and as kind of a bit of fun during lockdown, I did a little back garden photo shoot, and this is actually the first costume that I really put next to classic cars and incorporated into classic cars, because a lot of the photos that I'd taken were just against a boring black brick wall that was in my parents' back garden, and weren't particularly interesting. So I played about with some very primitive attempts at photoshopping me in different poses into different backgrounds that I found online, and also this photo that we got from quite a few years back of one of my dad's cars next to a World War II Spitfire. And so one of Dad's cars is a 1935 Singer Le Mans, and so they were obviously very period appropriate vehicles to have in the background next to the photos that I'd taken, and it was quite a bit of fun, and I really enjoyed posting them and sharing them with my cosplay friends, who were all doing various different things to keep themselves busy and interested in cosplay during the lockdowns. So that was really my first integration of classic cars into cosplay, but I didn't actually own a classic car myself at the time. That came a couple of months later, still kind of in and out of various stages of lockdown. I was also attempting to buy a house at the time and knew that I needed to buy my first car. You all know the story. I ended up buying Peggy, who you now probably understand a lot more about where her name comes from. And I saw her blue colour and immediately knew that I wanted to name her after Peggy Carter, because she has, in the TV show, a fantastic blue suit that she's pretty well known for. A lot of her colours that she wears are red, white and blue, and so I knew that I wanted to name my car after her, and kind of as time's gone on, I've added more and more bits of theming to the inside and also the outside, for painting the wheels partially red as well. And I jokingly said at the time, when I bought her, somewhat jokingly, that this was going to be my most expensive cosplay accessory. At £4,500, there are people who have spent way more on cosplays, but it was a big amount at the time. And yeah, I said, oh, it's going to be great for cosplays, because whilst a Morris Minor is not period accurate to a lot of what we see in comics and on TV shows of the character Peggy Carter, especially mine being a 1968, it does share quite a lot of styling similarities to a lot of the cars that are in the TV show, being those 1940s and 50s American kind of big round Airstream sort of shaped vehicles. She does share a lot of similarities, and those vehicles played quite a large part in the TV show and were something that I really enjoyed about it. So I thought, you know, it can be a lot of fun to use her as a kind of a bit of a prop. And not long after things started to return back to normal, I tried to recreate some pictures of Peggy Carter, who was played by Hayley Atwell in the TV show and films, next to some of the vehicles from the shows, but with me in cosplay and my car, rather than something that's necessarily screen accurate. And a lot of my cosplays haven't been about screen accuracy, they've been more about having fun with the character, trying something different. A lot of Peggy Carter cosplayers have gone in for the really fancy suit that she's now got as part of the Marvel universe, where she's got like a super soldier suit, and I've not done that yet, partially because obviously this hobby costs me a lot of money in terms of classic cars, so I go for cosplays that aren't necessarily quite as expensive, but also because I have a lot of fun with my slightly different takes on those costumes as well. So after those initial couple of photos that I think I just took on an industrial estate on a weekend to kind of replicate some of the industrial landscape that was there in the pictures, I did a couple a few months later on where I dressed in kind of clothes that were quite similar to Peggy's, took my shield just with me, and we stopped on the way to, I think, a meal out to take some photos with the car in a lay-by, and those are some of my favourite photos of me and the car, and because it really encompasses a lot of my favourite things, my car, my cosplay, my favourite character. And then last year I actually finally managed to debut my USO girl costume at a Comic-Con, and then I loved wearing it so much that I wore it to a couple of Jubilee events and took Peggy along to those Jubilee events, and was able to get some photos there of me in the USO girl costume with Peggy. And then I wore this cosplay, which I'm wearing at the moment, which is based somewhat obscurely off of a postage stamp that came out for Marvel's 75th anniversary with Peggy Carter on it. And I wore this in October, and when I wore it, it felt very much kind of like a mechanic fixing things on the go kind of version of Peggy, working out in the field. And so when I wore it, I was like, I really want to do that sort of photo shoot with my car and this cosplay. But obviously that was October Comic-Con, and I've not really had much chance to wear it and go out since because of winter weather and all those sorts of things. So finally used a bit of my annual leave today to go out and take those photos. But it is just a bit of fun, a bit of different way to enjoy my classic car, to have a bit of fun with my other hobby that I enjoy, and I guess make a little bit of content for Instagram, because I have a separate Instagram for kind of my cosplay and clothing related stuff, though I will probably end up sharing a few of these photos on the podcast Instagram, because I think they're quite fun as well. now working on something completely different. I've started to incorporate a few different cosplays from different fandoms in, and I've really got into Star Wars lately and think that a Jawa stealing parts off of a Morris Minor will be a really fun photo shoot to do in future. So I'm working on my Jawa costume for the Comic-Con in May at the moment, and we'll hopefully have some of those photos to share with you soon. But yeah, hopefully that's been a little bit of an insight into why Peggy is called Peggy, and also a bit of an insight into a bit of fun that I have with my car in terms of something a little bit different. And it might well be that you yourself are listening along, enjoy cosplay and hadn't thought about incorporating a vehicle into your photos, or perhaps you are fortunate enough to own a classic car and hadn't considered that a good way to get some young people interested in owning classic cars would be to offer the use of your vehicle for these sorts of photo shoots and things like that, and to look out for those opportunities, because I'm a firm believer that the best ways to get more people interested in classic cars is to have them sit in a classic car, experience a classic car, make memories with a classic car, and generally have some fun that then makes them want to have their own car, and makes them realise that you can enjoy them that way. So yeah, just a little bit of fun. I suspect this will go out probably either the weekend before or after. I'm actually at a Comic-Con in May, and I will be uploading more cosplay photos from that without the car, because I don't take Peggy to the London Comic-Con, and yeah, it will be quite a bit of fun to share those photos as well. But that's it for today's podcast. Thank you ever so much for listening. I appreciate it's something a little bit different, but perhaps you learned something, and in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.